All right. Cool. Well, thanks everyone for joining me today. My name is Joel Steidel, and I'm the Director of Engineering at Design Group. I'm based here in Denver, Colorado. I used to say Atten was based in Denver, Colorado, but as of about a month ago, we're completely remote at this point. And just in case you're wondering, it's snowing a bit in Denver today and cold. All right. So, why we're here. So I assume most folks here might have a similar story to me. You've somehow found yourself serving in some sort of IT capacity with your organization. You'll have to excuse me, I'll probably cough some during the call today. And you have a healthy fear around security and making sure that your organization and your website are secure. And in some cases, maybe you're too small to justify a full-time IT person, so you're doing your best to make it happen. For some of you that have joined, maybe you're fortunate enough to work for a larger organization where you only have to think about part of your organization's security. But in this current climate we're in, it seems like multiple times a week we hear about hacks and breaches, or the chances of that sort of thing have increased, and that's not something that any of us want to participate in. So there's always more we can be doing, but I wanted to share some of the ideas and tools that have helped Atten and our clients be more resilient and security aware. All right, so for our agenda today, it's really broken down into two pieces. I believe that good website and web application security starts with having good organizational security practices. And so I'm going to talk about both of those today. And as a reminder, feel free to chat your questions. I'm happy to go deeper on any topics. And if I don't have an answer for you, I work with a lot of really smart people, and I'm happy to follow up afterwards. All right, so first I want to start off why I think many of you are here, and that's maintaining and securing your web-based applications. So for software as a service products, something like Salesforce, Squarespace, Jira, many of these things fall into that category. You hope they're handling security, right? Um, we at least put our trust in them. For non-software as a service products, so things like WordPress and Drupal, things like that, you or your vendor are on the hook for security. Real quickly, I'll plug a service that Atten offers. We have a service called Lights On, created specifically for making sure web-based applications like Drupal and WordPress aren't left vulnerable. So it's a Lights On, as you expect, is kind of like the bare minimum. It handles doing uh, all your updates and keeping you secure. I'll talk about that more here in a bit. But I also wanted to share some tips around keeping your web-based applications more secure. These tips focus largely around Drupal, but could be applied to many different web-based applications. One thing I'll talk a lot about today is two-factor authentication and the value in that. So the first thing I would recommend with any web-based application is enforce logging in through some sort of single sign-on mechanism. For Atten, we actually do this with Google Workspace. So all of our company emails are provisioned with Google Workspace. And then to log into our Drupal site, you have to log in through Google. And for us, that actually enforces that every user logging into our website has two-factor authentication turned on. And another advantage of this is if an employee departs, you simply block their Google account and they lose access to the website. Um, it centralizes the management of that to a single location. If single sign-on isn't an option, enabling a Drupal module like password policy will ensure users are creating more secure passwords. I have a really interesting chart that I'll share here in a bit that shows how important having good passwords really is. And there's also a number of security related modules for Drupal. Someone packaged up a bunch of those in one called Security Pack. I don't necessarily recommend installing Security Pack, but it's they've pulled together all those modules in one place. So I suggest just going to look there at some of the landscape of some good security modules that you can consider using. Drupal, as you know, has a really flexible permission system, but this can also get you in trouble. It's really easy for someone to turn on permissions for someone during testing and forget to turn those off. So we recommend auditing those permissions at some sort of interval. We've also set up automated testing to test all the different roles and permissions that users have to make sure they can only see and access what they need to be able to access. Because obviously it can be very time consuming to log in as users with various roles on your site and test all the various things. So automating that process can be really advantageous. If you didn't know, Drupal has a really great security team. And each Drupal website can be configured to send you an email when there are security updates for Drupal core or any of the contributed modules. And if you didn't know, Drupal, you can sign up to receive Drupal security emails on Drupal.org. They send those typically every Wednesday, and that will let you know about any sort of core security updates that need to be applied. One thing I will mention though is sometimes it's helpful to have someone that knows Drupal really well to interpret those security releases that are coming out. Sometimes they don't apply to you specifically in your site's configuration. So, for example, if you have a fairly small site with, say, 10 trusted users, and one of the security updates coming out only really applies to an untrusted user base or something like that, you may not have to worry about applying that update so quickly. All right, moving on. Using a hosting provider where it makes it harder to make simple mistakes, like leaving a copy of the database in a web accessible location, or accidentally forgetting to adjust file permissions. I'll talk at length here in a bit about choosing a good hosting provider. And then lastly, Drupal.org has a lot of good resources on security best practices. If you Google Drupal.org security best practices, you'll find some of those resources. All right, so moving on, before we get into talking about passwords and password management, I wanted to show this really helpful chart, and I have to give Joe Crespo credit for sending this to me. If I don't give him credit, he'll give me a lot of grief later. So you can see how important it is to create a password that's long enough. What's crazy to me is that a password of 7 characters with a mix of numbers, upper, lowercase, and symbols can be cracked in 31 seconds in this day and age. And so it just goes to show how important it is to create longer passwords, and longer passwords that aren't all numbers, for example. Basically, the more combinations, the harder it gets to crack. Anyway, that was a interesting chart. Moving on to two-factor authentication. At this point, I imagine everyone on the call has heard of two-factor authentication. You're probably forced to use it with your bank. If you're not familiar with it, it's the, after you enter your username and password, it's the text message or phone call or authenticator app that gives you an additional code to enter. A 2019 report from Microsoft concluded that two-factor authentication just works. It blocks 99.9% of automated attacks. So one thing that I do is enforce two-factor authentication for all of our employees' email accounts. And this is a email is a really important one to do that because you have so many things linked to it, so many different applications. So securing email is really important. And with something like Google Workspace, I'm sure you've seen all over the internet the buttons that are sign in with Google. And I actually encourage and try to enforce wherever possible employees do that. Because what that does is centralizes everything to their Google account and enforces that two-factor authentication for all those other services as well. And then services that can't be linked to your Google account, you just have to weigh the risk factors. So, for example, if it's a service where you have some company documentation that's just not all that important, maybe you don't need two-factor authentication for that. But for things like where you have your domain registered, that's really important. So just being conscious about where you should enable that is important. All right, password management. So whenever possible, don't share credentials, but sometimes it can't be helped, right? And the main reason why you shouldn't share credentials really comes down to an audit log. So most applications have some sort of log that shows who was logged in and doing what particular actions. And if you're all sharing the same account, you have no accountability there. So if there is some sort of hack, there's no way of really knowing, did it come from a particular person, or was it just somebody else logged in? So whenever possible, don't share credentials. But when you have to, using a team password manager is the way to go. Going back to our chart previously, password managers can be set up to generate passwords of a certain length and making sure those are unique. When employees come and go from an organization, it's really easy to revoke access and regenerate shared passwords if necessary. And many password managers allow you to more securely share a password with someone outside your organization, so you're not copying and pasting it into insecure methods like email or Slack or other plain text methods that maybe you've used in the past. And there's a ton of password managers out there. Our team uses 1Password for Teams. I know Bitwarden and LastPass are good options as well. All right, so track and limit access. In large organizations and universities, you may implement something like Microsoft Active Directory or Okta. If you're at a university, you've probably, logged into a service like this, and you get the screen of all the different apps that you have access to, and that's great. Um, if you're a smaller org, a spreadsheet will probably suffice. So um, a spreadsheet that keeps track of every application that you offer to your employees, and when an employee gets hired, just simply checking off what they have access to, what level of access they have. So, if it's an application with different roles, that can be really valuable. And then if someone leaves your organization, you can go back through that same list and make sure they get removed from all the applications where they have access. Being diligent about this can actually save you money. You're not paying for accounts and licenses that you're no longer using. All right, personal computer security. This is kind of a tough one. For smaller orgs, you know it's hard to have a centralized way to manage people's machines. So um, you may have someone in the organization that downloads the new operating system the day it comes out, and then you've got other folks that would just run Windows XP into the ground because they don't care. And so it's tough to manage that. While you can encourage people to update their machines, they may not listen. But as a baseline, requiring people to turn on disk encryption and making sure everyone's using that password on their machine is important. Also, we've been experimenting with an application called Pareto Security. As far as I know, this is just available on Mac, but it after you install it, it evaluates kind of 4 different categories of security. So it will check things like if you have file sharing turned on your Mac, or if there are system updates that need to be done. And it rewards the employee with, kind of different badges if they take care of the issues that are found. I'm not sure if there's an equivalent on Windows. One thing to mention is Pareto Security is not antivirus. I think it can be a good idea to run something like that, like Malwarebytes, which I know has a Windows version. Anyway, I think the point is, if you're a smaller org and you have looser control, it's a good idea to come to a consensus about some sort of additional layer of security you can have for people on your team there. All right, following up on hosting and server management. So 10 years ago, it was common to run your own web server. And hopefully this is something you are no longer doing unless you have experts helping. Even if you're working with a provider like AWS, Amazon Web Services, or DigitalOcean, it still puts a lot of the security measures on you to keep things system level software up to date. We encourage our clients to always use a platform as a service provider where you're not on the hook for those system level updates. Obviously, it requires trust that they're doing those, but it definitely takes some of that responsibility off of you. And listed on the screen are a few providers that Atten enjoys working with. I put them out there simply as good options. Good hosting providers offer things like automated backups, access management, so everyone accessing code on the site has their own unique account, a requirement of something like SSH keys to access the server, One thing that a lot of the providers listed here do really well is limiting change management, or limiting how you change code on the site to being only able to do that through something like Git version control. So it leaves a really nice paper trail. To hack a lot of these servers, um, you would have to do so through the version control system. And then lastly, ease of upgrading software your web application relies on. So just as Drupal and WordPress are continually updated, so are things like MySQL and PHP. And what's great about a lot of these providers is it's almost a one click to go from PHP 7.1 to PHP 7.4, for example. Things like PHP are coming to an end of life, or expiring fairly often, and being able to just change that in one place quickly is actually not only keeps you secure, but it's fast. In the past, you would have to make sure that you have the right version of PHP installed on your server and do a lot of testing. So just the fact that you can automate that one piece is really awesome. All right, VPN. I think this one is you could probably get in a discussion um, about the merits of a VPN, but when our team went completely remote during COVID, VPN just felt like a good move. Um, so I don't know, you know, I have no idea how secure everyone on my team's home networks are. I have no idea if they've done the firmware updates on their Wi-Fi or their routers or their modems. I don't know if people were working from coffee shops, etc. So a VPN for us was just an extra added layer as people went remote. Um, it also allows us to all connect from the same IP address. So if we need to limit a particular service down to an IP, we can do so. Also, if we work with clients that require IP whitelisting, it's really easy to give a single IP address that way. Um, we use a service called Nord Layer for that, and that just it's essentially like software as a service for VPN. So we're not managing a VPN server or anything like that. All right, security training. So you don't know what you don't know. Um, and when you're hiring new employees, we're typically not hiring them because they're some sort of security expert. So it's hard to know what kind of awareness they have or what their history is. So having an employee go through some sort of training when they join the team can be really helpful. There's a handful of companies out there that provide like 1 to 2 hour long training session that cover things like phishing, protecting personal information, etc. Um, GoDaddy, I think about 2 years ago, did something really mean to their employees because they sent out this email here and basically saying that employees would get a $650 one-time holiday bonus, and it was a phishing test for their team. Um, and I think something like 500 employees clicked through, and filled out the form and failed the phishing attack. I don't necessarily suggest this because it's just mean, but I thought it was pretty funny. Um, Another thing that's interesting, if you have kids or you enjoy games, Google has a game called Interland, Interland, Land. and it's a game that teaches just like security awareness. For it's aimed at kids, but actually found it really fun to play with my kids. Cool. And lastly, have a security policy. So write down your policy and make sure your employees are aware of it. Include expectations and what to do in case of a hack or a breach. The act of writing it down will help you realize your gaps as well and see how you can improve. Obviously, it's always a moving target, and there's always more we can be doing. So if you have any questions, please feel free to throw those in the chat. And if you can do, there's a lot there, and it may feel overwhelming. If there's one thing you can do to protect your web application or your website, it's keeping it updated. And again, Atten has a line of service called Lights on Support where we do exactly this. We'd be happy to connect with you. You can check out atten.io/lights-on-support.